Greetings. I am at Fort King in Ocala, Florida. Fort King was built during the Second Seminole War, probably the most significant fort out of more than 100 built here in the state of Florida, mainly because it is in the center of north central Florida and was on the northern fringe of the Seminole Reservation. A lot of historic things took place here, which we're going to learn as we take a little tour. Going to show you around a little bit. And I would also add that there are three important points for the selection of a site of a fort. One, it should be on a high knoll and defendable. Two, there needs to be a good water source. Three, there needs to be a good source of lumber nearby to actually build the stockade. And most of the forts built during the Second Seminole War were of a wood stockade. Not all of them, but a good many of them were. And this is a replica that represents very well what Fort King would have looked like. So now let's learn a little more about it.
The Fort King historic landmark is really a tale of two forts. What you see today is a replica of the second fort. The first fort was built by the U.S. military in 1827 during tensions with the Seminole in Florida, a tribe of mostly Creek people who formed in the early 19th century. The dimensions of this stockade are 162 feet by 152 feet. That's how the original fort was supposed to be shaped. The first fort, for a lack of funding for the U.S. Army, was built in the shape of an irregular pentagon as seen in this sketch. The day of December 28, 1835, would become a day of infamy for Fort King and the U.S. Army in Florida. On this date, Ocala, a leader of the Seminoles, led a surprise attack on Fort King, killing Indian removal agent Wiley Thompson and 4 others. At about the same time, Chief Micanopy led 180 warriors in a devastating ambush of an expeditionary force of 108 men led by U.S. Army Major Francis Dade. They were en route to Fort King from Fort Brooke in Tampa to resupply and reinforce the remote post. The surprise attack left only 3 survivors. The 2 coordinated attacks became the catalyst for the Second Seminole War. The first fort was burnt by the Seminoles in 1836 and shortly after rebuilt by the U.S. Army in the configuration you see today.
At 2 corners of the fort, we have watchtowers or guard towers. They were supposed to measure 14 by 14 feet, and they would have provided good observation points. On the lower floor, we have actually 3 observation windows. There's 2, and the third one is kind of blocked off by the stairs. Yeah, you can see here there would have been a very good vantage point. Second window here. So these watchtowers actually faced east, south, and west. At the southeast corner, that's where we're at now. Then they had another one at the northwest corner. The sill be about chest height, be perfect for laying a musket on, or a rifled musket, depending on what they had. There are 2 entrances to the gate marked by these large wooden doors, big enough for a buggy or a carriage to pass through. And then if we go and look at the north side, we can see a duplicate there. Here we have a replica of a blacksmith shop at Fort King. A blacksmith shop was the key to survival and expansion on the Florida frontier. And if you'll look at this sketch, I'm assuming it was done by a soldier, you'll see there's a blacksmith shop right here. And they would have made kitchen utensils, wagon wheels, horseshoes, repairs for the gunsmith, and most importantly, making nails and hardware critical to building. So since the Welcome Center is closed today, it is open every Friday and Saturday from 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. I can still look at a really neat cannon. Now this one happens to be a replica, and it was used as what that's called the Silver Springs cannon, originally displayed along Silver Springs Jungle Cruise boat riding tour, 1930s to the 1970s. And I also see on the brass plate of manufacture that a Bob Mullins made it, Boswick, Florida, and Boswick is in the same county I live in. And good on Bob Mullins for taking the time to design a fully cast howitzer. I also wanted to add that the grounds here are meticulously kept up. They do have picnic tables where you could bring a lunch, or benches over there under the shade tree. Just very nice. There are bathrooms. Another picnic table here. I mentioned earlier about having a ready water source that would be there 360 days a year. And the water source is right down this trail a little bit. Easy walking, kind of mulched, shady, easy to navigate. Wheelchairs, maybe not so much. Walkers might get kind of tripped up a little bit in the soft leaf litter. But folks on canes, yep, you can handle it. All right, so let's go on and see what we got. Coming up to another intersection. I'm trying to remember which way to go to get to, they say the trail. No, this is it right here. As I make my way down to this pool of water that the U.S. Army soldiers garrisoned at the fort would have used for drinking water, for washing, and so forth. I'm going to point out some of the native plant species for those who are interested. I'm not an expert, but I thought you might enjoy learning about what's what. And what looks like a green mat is really a thin layer of weeds or aquatic, I guess, grass. It's called duckweed. It's only maybe 2 or 3 inches thick. And if you wanted to get water out of there, you could just throw a bucket in there and go down and get it. Obviously, nowadays you'd have to boil it, but this was the main source of water for the fort. And there is a sign over to my left. We'll go back and check on it here in just a minute and see what it's got to say. I see they've planted a few cypress trees in here, probably trying to mimic maybe what the plants along the edge of the pool would have looked like back in the early 1800s. Got a sweet gum tree there. The white flowering tree, that's elderberry. And of course we have spatterdock lily pads there. They have kind of a yellowish bud that comes out on them, but apparently not right now. Let's go see what the sign says. The sign I'm looking at off to my right says that this is a seep spring, which means that the water does not come up through the aquifer and boil up into a big spring like we have so many of in Florida. Instead, it kind of seeps from the higher ground and then oozes out into this pool behind me. Thus, the term seep spring, called a button bush. And right next to the button bush, we have what's called a loblolly bay tree. It is a straight trunk wetlands tree, and it blooms these big white flowers during late summer. It can get up to around 40, 50 feet in height. And then we have our ubiquitous, called a southern fox grape. And sometimes they actually do come out in grapes. I don't know if I can't remember now if it's a muscadine or scuppernong, but I just know in general the term southern fox grape is used. And next, just off the trail, is this camphor tree. And the camphor, when the stem or a leaf is broken and crushed, it's very aromatic, and it can be used as an insect repellent. And when I sniff it now, I can tell you it's really strong. And beneath the camphor tree, we have a southern magnolia, big, bright green, glossy leaves, bigger than the palm of my hand. That's the key. Now I'm taking the trail out and back to the replica of the fort. There are no large stands of timber here anymore. Back in the early 1800s, there probably would have been massive pine trees growing all here on this kind of a sloping hill that goes down to the spring seep, they call it. And this is likely where they would have harvested a lot of the lumber to make the stockade for the fort. And this is a sour orange original rootstock. And we can see over here proof of that. And here's an old orange laying on the ground with a single fly buzzing around it. And finally, we always have to be cautious of this 3-leafed plant, kind of bright green. There's more of it. Actually, it's growing as a vine here. This is poison ivy. Here's a particularly large specimen right here. Look how large the leaves are. You really got to watch out for poison ivy in Florida because beginning in early to late spring, gosh, they're growing everywhere. The high ground and the swamps. And in the swamps, you'll see thousands of tendrils come up just like that. And yeah, you got to be really careful if you're allergic like me. I was a Florida game warden, I know, and I've had some serious problems. In fact, one time I had all of my throat almost swollen shut, had to go to the doctor to get a cortisone shot in order to free it up so I could breathe. So, got to be careful. Well, as you can see, I've ended up about where I started. I didn't come out on the trail I went in on, but where this trail empties out behind the museum, it's probably a couple hundred yards from where I began. If you take the shortest trails down to the pond and then back to the museum, it's probably no more than half a mile. It is easy walking. Like I said, the wheelchair, not so much. Walker could have some issues with the soft leaf litter, but a cane, yeah, you're good to go. I'm of that age where I think about that. But listen, guys, I appreciate you for watching. This is just meant to be a brief snapshot, if you will, of what Fort King was about.